Pete Rowan, welcome to eTown. Welcome back to eTown. So good to see you. Good to have you here. Good to hear you play and sing.
Thank you.
There is nobody like you. There is nobody like old Pete Rowan. Now, Bill Monroe used to address you in the plural, as I recall.
Pete Rowans.
Pete Rowans.
Yeah. That was my name. I should have kept that name. That was a good name.
It sounded good.
Pete Rowans.
It sounded good when he said it, yeah. You're in good voice. You sound good. I do want to talk a little bit about your musical journey. And I know I listed kind of your abbreviated discography before when I was talking about stuff, but I do want to ask you about learning, because I'm just imagining that you, as a guy who grew up in, Massachusetts and must have been fascinated by music, whatever you were hearing, you were soaking it in, lapping it up. But somehow you had the drive with Bill Keith's help to get to Nashville and to get the gig, singing with father of bluegrass music and singing cheek to jowl, just right there, sharing a mic, shoulder to shoulder, sharing a mic, driving on the bluegrass breakdown and doing all that stuff.
Bill, Del McCurry said that Del was a little shy and used to back off the mic, and Bill would say, "Crowd me now, crowd me."
There is a funny story that I remember you telling me, which I may have shared with our audience before, which is a time when you were in the audience at Bean Blossom and some other person probably had given you some hallucinogenic drugs that you didn't know was in the drink. It was like somebody surprised you probably, because but in any event, you're tripping your brains out in the audience, and Bill Monroe calls you up to sing with him. Is that true? Is that a true story?
Not a bit, sir. No. He did call me up, but I was not under the weather. It would be hard to do that. Bluegrass is very minutely detailed music, and it's not at all spacey.
Only Butch Robbins can do it.
Butch, yeah.
Well, I do want to ask you about three things you learned from Bill Monroe. What are three things you learned from your time working with Bill Monroe?
Well, when I was with him, I was 22 to about 25, going on 26, and he was in his 50s. He'd been on the Grand Ole Opry for 25 years. And he used to say, in these long night drives after shows, going off to some other place through the Kentucky night, and in some car that might not break down. And I just remember him saying, just out of sort of nowhere, "Don't ever give up, Pete. Don't ever give up."
Wow.
And I think after a while we start to see, how much drive it took Bill, to never give up and never lose sight of his vision.
And that was not a great time in his career either. Early 60s.
Elvis and electric honky-tonk country had taken over the airwaves, and Bill was a hit songwriter. Blue Moon of Kentucky was a hit, as was Kentucky Waltz. And he had been up on the charts, and he had done well. We used to rehearse, Nick, and we'd rehearse, and he would sit aside and go through his mail while we rehearsed for him. And he would just had a little penknife, and he'd open each one, and a lot of them would just go right in the wastebasket, and then he'd look at one and he'd put it in his hat. And I figured that the ones that went in the hat were the royalty statements that were,
Thank you, Elvis.
Thank you, and I did learn from that.
Yeah.
When I heard a reporter ask Bill, "Mr. Monroe, do you think Elvis has desecrated bluegrass music by doing your song Blue Moon of Kentucky?" And Bill said, "No, sir, them were powerful checks." I learned that from him.
Yeah. I mean, Bill was a driven, creative force and tapped into something really cosmic, unlike a lot of musicians. He really did feel on a deep level the power of the music, and almost in a way that some blues artists do, or some folk musicians that really struggled. He had into my ear anyway. He had that connection with with the blues and with some deep connection with the music. Not typical. He also had some bad habits. He was not a drinker. He was not...
That is a really bad habit for me.
I guess I set that one up for you, didn't I?
That lob
Yeah.
landed right square in the court.
Right, landed right square in the sweet spot there. Well, listen, I think we all benefited. Again, you can hear the records that Bill Monroe and Pete Rowan recorded, 14 tracks or something like that, recorded in the 60s, and they're out there for your enjoyment. I do want to talk about a few more of those influential folks and maybe some things you learned from them before we get back to music. Why don't we just talk about David Grisman for a minute? Like, you met when you were really young, and what did you see in him that you recognized that you could share?
Well, you know, a lot of players were committed in those days, and there was a festival called the Old Time Fiddlers Festival in Union Grove, North Carolina. And that was the Mecca. That was where we would make the pilgrimage to, you know, work on down through Galax and go down there. And I played a little bit at Galax, backed somebody up, Gloria Bell, and she got first vocal prize. And I was happy, and staying up all night and learning how to pick mandolin, play Oh Them Golden Slippers, you know. And they just had a lot of energy. And I didn't know I was going to meet David. I had heard about his band, the New York Ramblers, but I got down to Union Grove early, and I was staying up with all the pickers there. Great, wonderful fiddlers and old-time pickers during that time down there. And I remember the day that the New York Ramblers arrived, and they looked like the mafia. They had won the year before, and they came out of their car with a kind of certain New York swagger. And they were all in a sedan, you know, 6 people driving from New York to North Carolina. And then here comes David Grisman. He steps out, and he's like the gunslinger. He's got like the mandolin, F5, you know, the mandolin. And our eyes locked. And I knew from then on. But he was willing. He was willing to go those miles. That's the other thing is we didn't have internet, so we had to go the miles, and it just began like that. And David had his own a personal, you know, lifestyle that took him to the West, and he played with Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead. And when I left Bill Monroe, he had come back to Boston, and with a young child and wife, and we moved in together, and waited for Sergeant Pepper to come out, and we got the advance copy. And man, then we started listening, you know. But with David, first of all, he was a tremendous listener, you know, and he'd be, and with respect, I'll show you how he listened. He'd just look at you with that eyeball and go. We'd be listening to like Ali Akbar Khan play, you know, sarod, Indian music, and be like, and you'd be going, yeah, I'm going to be getting this. I'm getting it. Yep. So David was a great companion, a great listener and communicator of the joy of music. Yeah. And I mean, we had a band called Earth Opera, and Simon and Garfunkel's management offered us a deal where we could just record the 2 of us, and they would put New York rock and roll players behind it, and we'd make hit records. And of course, being bluegrass musicians was like, oh no, man, what? We play the music. You know? So we turned that down, but we did, I guess, two records for Elektra Records, Jack Holzman. And one of the last people that had recorded us as just a bluegrass or string band players was Paul Rothschild. And at that time when we signed with Elektra, Paul Rothschild was producing a band called The Doors. He'd gone from old time music to The Doors, and then so we got to open for The Doors. Now we're talking.
What did you learn from Jim Morrison?
That's top secret.
Wow. Okay. Well, the saga continues. We're not going to touch on everything, but I love sharing these stories with our listeners, our audience. Quickly, just a couple things. What did you take in from the way Jerry Garcia listens to music?
Well, Jerry was listening to everything from Rastafarian horns to, Jamaican horns playing gospel tunes, and we'd go up and listen to it at his house. And when I sang "Land of the Navajo" and I was singing the ending, and I kind of looked over at him like, "That's probably enough, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, man, more." So that's what I learned from Jerry.
That's what you learned from Jerry. Yeah. Do that some more.
Do it more.
Yeah.
And
That's
there's
awesome.
just so many stories about that era.
Well, I think the other thing I just want to mention before we're going to play here in a minute, but I think about all these iconic players whose voices are so distinctive, and you've been able to weave them into your sound and onto your records. People like Vassar Clements, Flaco Jimenez, just amazing players. Of course, all our posse of the Jerry Douglas, Stuart Duncan, Tim O'Brien, all those people that are more our people. But you've cast a wide net, and you've really you've expanded the palette that people think about this kind of music, which is a big deal. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate that, Nick. Yeah.
All right, well, let's play some more music.
Don't ever give up.
Don't ever give up. And more. Do that some more.
More.
We are going to do this a little more. We're actually chat a little more later in the show, but right now we're going to get back to music. You are listening to eTown. Please welcome back Mr. Peter Rowan.